An elderly woman with silver hair tied neatly in a bun stepped into the Jiu-Jitsu academy, her white kimono crisply pressed. "Get out of here, Grandma," sneered Coach Jackson, prompting laughter from the class. But when he challenged her to spar, no one could have predicted what came next, least of all him. Earlier that morning, Edith Simmons had carefully folded her kimono and placed it into her worn gym bag. At 72, her movements were slow but deliberate, shaped by decades of discipline. Her fingers brushed the edges of her faded black belt, its fraying threads whispering stories of over 40 years on the mat. Sunlight filtered through the windows of her modest apartment. She'd only just moved to the quiet suburb 3 weeks prior, following the death of her husband. Starting over wasn't easy, but surrender had never been Edith's way. Once she'd unpacked the essentials and arranged her small space, only one task remained: find a new dojo. "Your joints aren't getting any younger, Edie," she muttered, wincing slightly as she stood. Her doctor's advice echoed in her mind: keep moving, or start declining. For Edith, there was never any doubt which path she would choose. She paused at the mirror. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual bun. Her face bore the lines of time, but her eyes remained sharp. She nodded at her reflection, a ritual she'd performed before every training session since 1980, when she'd first stepped onto the mat at age 28. Few knew Edith's jiu-jitsu story. She had trained under Master Takahashi for 15 years, earning her black belt at a time when female practitioners were rare. She raised 2 children, supported her husband's career as a school principal, and quietly worked her way to a second-degree black belt. She never boasted. She didn't need to. The art was in her bones, her reflexes, her quiet, unshakable confidence. First day at a new dojo, she reminded herself, grabbing her keys, just like riding a bike. The drive to Elite Martial Arts Academy took 15 minutes. The building was sleek and modern, with tall windows and a parking lot crowded with luxury vehicles. Edith's modest sedan looked out of place among the SUVs and sports cars. Young, athletic men and women in branded gym wear filed into the academy. Edith adjusted her plain white kimono and stepped out of the car. At the front desk, a young woman with styled hair glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice edged with skepticism. "Yes," Edith replied with quiet certainty. "I'm interested in joining your jiu-jitsu program." The receptionist raised her eyebrows. "Our adult classes are pretty intense. You might be more comfortable in our senior yoga on Tuesdays." Edith smiled gently. "I've been training in jiu-jitsu for over 40 years, dear. I'm here to continue my practice." A flicker of doubt crossed the receptionist's face, but she kept her tone neutral. "We have open mat in 15 minutes. New students can observe and speak with a coach afterward." "Perfect," said Edith. "You'll need to sign these waivers. Coach Jackson will assess your level." Edith signed with a steady hand, unfazed by the receptionist's lingering gaze. As she made her way to the locker room, she could feel the stairs trailing behind her, silently wondering what business an elderly woman had in a competitive academy. She smiled. It wouldn't be the first time she'd been underestimated. The main training area was spacious and bright, with pristine mats and top-tier equipment. Around 20 students warmed up, most in their 20s and 30s, their movements crisp and focused, the room alive with the rhythm of bare feet on mat and controlled breathing. Edith stood at the edge, assessing the scene with a practiced eye. The techniques being drilled were familiar, fundamentals she'd performed thousands of times. The energy was strong, the coaching attentive. This was a solid dojo. Then she saw him, Coach Adam Jackson, mid-30s, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating confidence that bordered on arrogance. His blue kimono was adorned with competition patches and his black belt was tied with military precision. He moved through the room with swagger, correcting stances and demonstrating techniques, met with nods of deference. Then his eyes landed on Edith. He froze. Just for a moment. Coach Jackson's expression shifted from surprise to amusement. He leaned toward a muscular young man with a purple belt and said something under his breath. The student glanced at Edith, then snickered. Unfazed, Edith stepped onto the mat and bowed, following traditional dojo etiquette. The room's chatter slowly faded as more students noticed the elderly woman in the white kimono. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Coach Jackson called out, his voice echoing across the now silent space. "You might have wandered into the wrong class. Senior Tai Chi is in the small studio down the hall." A ripple of laughter followed. Edith remained composed, her expression unreadable. "I'm here for the Jiu-Jitsu class," she said, her voice steady. "I recently moved to town and I'm looking for a new place to train." Jackson exchanged a glance with one of his senior students, his smirk widening. "Train? At your age?" He didn't bother hiding his disbelief. "No offense, ma'am, but Jiu-Jitsu is a demanding, full-contact sport. We train for competition, here." "I'm well aware of what Jiu-Jitsu involves," Edith replied. "I've been practicing since 1980. That brought more stifled laughter from the class. Jackson's smile turned condescending. "Look, Grandma," he said, milking the nickname for laughs. "I admire the spirit, really. But this isn't the place for beginners, especially not ones who could get seriously hurt." "I understand your concern," Edith replied, still calm. "But I assure you I can manage." A blue belt called out from the back. "Can you even get up off the mat without help?" Laughter surged again, and even Jackson cracked a grin, before raising a hand to quiet them. "What belt do you claim to be?" he asked, the emphasis making his skepticism plain. "I don't claim anything," Edith said, meeting his gaze. "I earned my second-degree black belt under Master Hiroshi Takahashi in 1995. The name meant little to most of the students, but Jackson's expression flickered for just a second. Takahashi was a legend to those who knew, an old-school master, respected in the shadows of the sport. Jackson recovered quickly. "Well," he said, his smirk returning. "Things were different back then. Standards have come a long way." He gestured toward the viewing area with mock courtesy. "Why don't you watch from the sidelines today? You can decide if this program is right for your experience level." It was a dismissal thinly veiled as professional concern. A few students chuckled, clearly enjoying the spectacle. But Edith Simmons had not spent 40 years on the mat to be dismissed by a smug instructor with a clipboard smile. "I didn't come to watch," she said, her voice calm but commanding. The room fell quiet again. "I came to train." Jackson's smile faltered. He hadn't expected her to push back. Around the room, students exchanged looks. Curiosity now mingled with their amusement. "Ma'am," Jackson began, switching to a careful, patronizing tone, "we have insurance rules, safety protocols. I can't let someone in your condition join an advanced class without an assessment." "That's reasonable," Edith replied. "Then assess me." A few scattered chuckles rose from the group. Jackson crossed his arms, enjoying the spotlight. "You want me to assess you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow theatrically. "That's why I'm here." Jackson turned to the class, playing it up for laughs. "Well, folks, looks like today's lesson plan just changed. Time for a special evaluation." He pointed to a young man in a blue belt. "Mike, help us out. Let's show her what a basic exchange looks like." Mike stepped forward, grinning as if he'd just been offered dessert. But Edith didn't move. She looked straight at Jackson. "I'd prefer to work with you, Coach." The dojo went still. Someone in the back let out a quiet "oh," quickly hushed. Jackson's posture stiffened, his earlier smugness giving way to something colder. "Me?" he said. "You want to roll with me?" "You're the head instructor," Edith replied. "If I'm going to be evaluated, it should be by the person in charge." The challenge was plain, undeniable. Jackson hesitated. He could refuse and look weak, or accept and risk embarrassment. Either way, the balance in the room had shifted. After a beat, his ego surged to the surface again. This was a chance. He decided to put on a show. He'd go easy, demonstrate a few techniques, and gently put her in her place. "All right then," he said, tugging at his belt. "Let's see what you've got." "Fine," Jackson said at last, his confident grin returning. We'll do a light roll, 3 minutes, just to assess your movement. He turned to his class. Clear the center mat. The students quickly formed a circle around the main training area. Jackson, making a small show of it, removed his instructor's patch and laid it aside. Edith, quiet and deliberate, stepped into position. Her movements were slow but fluid, deceptively so. "I'll go very light," Jackson announced, projecting his voice for the audience. "Just working positions. No submissions. Ready, Mrs. Simmons?" "Edith," she corrected gently. "Edith Simmons, and yes, I'm ready when you are, Coach." The trap was set. "Begin." Jackson dropped into a classic starting stance, circling her with careful, theatrical restraint. This wasn't about technique. It was performance for the benefit of his students. "We focus on leverage over strength in Jiu-Jitsu," he lectured as he moved. "That's what makes it accessible to all ages and body types." He reached for her sleeve, intending to demonstrate a basic grip. What happened next unfolded so quickly, most of the class would later disagree on the sequence. As Jackson's hand touched her gi, Edith shifted, just slightly. Her hand closed around his wrist with surprising precision. Before he could react, she executed a flawless sleeve drag, breaking his balance and forcing him forward. Then, in one smooth motion, she dropped to a seated guard, her legs snaking around his as one foot hooked behind his ankle. Her grip shifted from sleeve to collar. She rotated her hips, pulled, and Jackson was falling. By the time his knees hit the mat, she had already transitioned. Technical mount, clean, controlled. Impossible, it seemed, for a 72-year-old to have just dismantled a black belt mid-motion. Collective gasp swept through the room. "What the—" Jackson started, trying to scramble, but Edith was already a step ahead. Her grips adjusted with clinical speed. His attempt to push back, a rookie mistake, played right into her hands. She redirected the pressure, opened a gap, and transitioned seamlessly to an armbar setup. Jackson recognized it too late. He tried to stack, to pass, but she was already there. Her hips pivoted, the arm extended, the submission locked in with surgical precision. "Tap," Jackson choked, slapping the mat. The room froze. 10 seconds. That's how long it had taken. Edith released the hold immediately and rose with graceful ease. She straightened, her GI, and bowed respectfully. "Thank you for the opportunity, Coach Jackson," she said, calm as ever. "I hope that addresses your concerns about my ability." Silence. The impossible had just unfolded in front of them, and no one dared speak. Jackson remained kneeling, his breath shallow, his pride fractured. Slowly he got to his feet, his face flushed, stunned. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, the mockery gone. "I told you," Edith replied as she adjusted her belt. "Edith Simmons, 2nd-degree black belt under Master Hiroshi Takahashi." A murmur rippled through the class. One older student stepped forward, his eyes widening. "Wait, Takahashi? As in the Takahashi? Trained all those champions back in the 90s? You're that Edith Simmons?" Edith nodded modestly. "I was one of his students." "No," the man said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You weren't just one of them. You were his top female competitor. I read about you in the old martial arts magazines. You won the Eastern Regionals 3 years in a row." More murmurs. Heads turned. Students whispered. Jackson stood frozen, the weight of realization dawning on his face. "That was a long time ago," Edith said softly. "I never trained for glory. It was always about the practice." Jackson cleared his throat, visibly struggling to reassemble his composure. His authority fractured, his dojo forever changed. Years of training had taught Coach Jackson a thing or two about humility, even if he didn't always practice it. He stepped forward and bowed formally. "Mrs. Simmons," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I owe you an apology. My behavior was disrespectful and unworthy of an instructor." Edith acknowledged the apology with a simple nod. "We all make judgments based on appearances," Jackson continued. "It's human. What matters is whether we're willing to revise those judgments when faced with the truth." A young woman in a purple belt stepped from the circle, still wide-eyed. "Ma'am, that arm bar, it was incredible. Would you be willing to show us that again?" Edith glanced at Jackson, raising an eyebrow. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a small, respectful nod. "I think we could all learn something today," he said, this time with genuine humility. "If Mrs. Simmons is willing." For the next hour, what had been planned as a routine training session became an impromptu masterclass. Edith demonstrated techniques with the precision of a lifelong practitioner. Her speed wasn't what it once was, but her timing, leverage, and understanding were impeccable. More impressive than her execution, though, was her ability to teach. She highlighted the subtleties, how a slight angle could change control, how weight distribution dictated transitions, how patience was often more powerful than aggression. Jackson, to his credit, participated fully. He asked thoughtful questions, helped demonstrate positions, and slowly allowed his earlier embarrassment to dissolve into admiration. It was clear he recognized what he was seeing. Not just talent, but mastery. "In my 44 years of practice," Edith said, guiding the class through a complex guard pass, "I've learned that Jiu-Jitsu isn't about strength or speed. Those fade. It's about principles, leverage, timing, balance, and above all, respect. For your opponent. For yourself." The students listened in rapt silence. Their earlier mockery was gone, replaced by awe. Something rare had walked into their dojo that day, and they knew it. As the class wound down, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Students who had snickered at Edith's arrival now approached her with questions. She answered each with patience, warmth, and quiet authority. Jackson stood at the edge of the mat, watching. When the final student stepped away, he approached her again, this time without bravado. "Mrs. Simmons," he began, his voice free of pretense, "I'd like to offer you a position here at Elite." Edith raised an eyebrow. "We have several women's and youth programs," he continued, "and they would benefit tremendously from your experience. Your knowledge is exceptional." "I didn't come here looking for a job, Coach Jackson," she replied gently. "I just wanted a place to train." "Of course," he said quickly. "You'll have full access to our facilities anytime, but I hope you'll consider sharing what you know. Even one class a week would mean a great deal to our students." Edith considered this. It wasn't what she'd planned. She'd simply been searching for a space to keep moving, to keep learning, to find a little peace in a new town. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But if I'm going to train here regularly, I have one condition." "Name it." "This dojo must be a place of respect. For everyone. Regardless of their age, gender, or how they look when they walk through that door." Her gaze met his, steady and calm. "What happened today should never happen to someone who comes here to learn." Jackson nodded, accepting the quiet rebuke with surprising grace. "You're right," he said. "That's a standard I should have upheld from the beginning. Consider it a promise." As Edith gathered her things, several students bowed to her formally, with respect typically reserved for the head instructor. "See you Thursday, Sensei Simmons?" asked the young woman in the purple belt, hopeful. Edith smiled. "Thursday will be fine." As she walked toward the door, she noticed a small group of older adults standing just outside the glass, watching with curiosity. They'd caught glimpses of her demonstration and were now speaking animatedly among themselves. The receptionist approached, looking sheepish. "Ma'am," she said, "some of the folks in the lobby, they're asking if we offer classes for, more mature students. And if you'd be the one teaching." Edith's smile deepened. "Tell them to come back on Thursday," she said. "We'll see what we can do." 3 months later, Elite Martial Arts Academy looked very different. What had once been a dojo focused almost entirely on young, competitive athletes had blossomed into a diverse, welcoming community. And, at the heart of that transformation was a woman in her 70s who had simply shown up one day and refused to be underestimated. Twice a week, Edith taught what had come to be known as the Foundations class, a session open to practitioners of all ages and experience levels. The focus wasn't on athleticism or competition prep, but on the timeless principles of Jiu-Jitsu that she had honed over decades: leverage, timing, and control. Surprisingly, the class quickly became the most popular on the academy's schedule. Younger students discovered that drilling fundamentals under Edith's watchful eye elevated their competitive performance in unexpected ways. Older practitioners found her deliberate, injury-conscious approach not only accessible but empowering, offering a clear path to progress without compromising safety. Perhaps most notable of all, Coach Jackson was a regular participant. He often volunteered as Edith's demonstration partner, his early humiliation having long since given way to deep respect and a sincere desire to learn. Mrs. Simmons has forgotten more about pressure distribution than most of us will ever know, he once told a local journalist writing a feature on their unique partnership. Today, the Academy was hosting a small in-house tournament. Competitors of varying belt ranks and ages filled the mats, with Edith and Jackson co-judging the matches. Between divisions, the two instructors gave live demonstrations, breaking down key techniques and offering insights for the spectators. Notice how leverage, not strength, creates the opportunity, Edith explained to the gathered crowd as she performed a technical armbar on Jackson, each motion slow and deliberate. This works for anyone, regardless of size or age, when done correctly. In the viewing area, several older onlookers watched with particular interest. They were part of a growing group affectionately known as the Silver Belts, senior students, who had joined after hearing about Edith's story. What began as curiosity had grown into community. "She's changed everything," one longtime instructor remarked to a guest. "Not just for older students, for all of us. She reminded us what really matters in Jiu-Jitsu." From the center of the mat, Edith caught sight of a new face entering the academy. An elderly gentleman leaning on a cane, his eyes scanning the room with uncertainty. She smiled, recognizing the same hesitation she'd once carried through those doors. Coach Jackson noticed her gaze and followed it. Without a word, he stepped off the mat, walked to the newcomer, and greeted him with a respectful bow, then gently guided him to a seat near the viewing area. Some lessons, Edith thought, had nothing to do with grips or guard passes. The most important ones reached far beyond the mat. Has this story touched your heart? Remember, appearances can be deceiving, and wisdom comes in many forms. Have you ever been underestimated or seen someone judged unfairly? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspirational tales that remind us to look deeper, listen harder, and lead with respect. Let us know where you're watching from and which part of Edith's journey resonated with you the most. Until next time, remember, respect is earned, not demanded. Mastery is proven through actions, not words. And the oldest tree in the forest often has the deepest roots.